In June of 2024, I was replaying the games Transformers War for Cybertron, Transformers Fall of Cybertron, and because I felt like tormenting myself, I played a little Transformers Rise of the Darkspark 2. And around the same time, rumors of the cancellation of the upcoming game Transformers Reactivate due to the lack of and removal of its promotion were circulating. I really hope that game comes out, that'd be so cool! But whether it comes out or doesn't, at least the initial reveal of the game's development in their teaser trailer revealed at the 2022 Game Awards would bring my attention to Transformer fanworks such as redesigns, which would lead to inspiring me to make my own Transformer redesigns, leading to me animating them, leading to me making this video about how I redesigned the Autobots, which you should totally check out too. And now it's time I talk about how I redesigned the Decepticons. Hi, my name is Joel Bolt Drawings, and I've been doing art and animation for a while, and most recently the subject of my animations have been my Transformer redesigns, which all start with making the redesigns in the first place. But how? Well, from a technical perspective, starting on my phone, I drew my redesigns on IBIS Paint X and animated them on Flip-A-Clip, usually in reference to existing Transformers scenes. Then, on my computer, for the animations that used 3D backgrounds, I edited out the blank backgrounds in each frame of the animations and exported them as a PNG sequence if necessary on Krita, and created the 3D backgrounds in Blender using textures I drew on IBIS Paint X. I would then place the PNG sequence in the 3D scene and use the camera to synchronize the sequence with the moving 3D background and export it as an MP4 file. Sometimes it's exported without the PNG sequence visible to only capture the moving background. Finally, on DaVinci Resolve, which is the video editing program I'm preparing this video on, in circumstances where I exported the background video without the sequence visible in the scene, I place the PNG sequence over the 3D background with the audio and export it as an MP4, MOV, or MKV video file. From a brainstorming perspective, which is covered a bit more in depth in the other video, I first considered a small roster to make redesigns for, because there are a lot of Transformers, so many so that I couldn't keep count. And some of you actually did reply some rough estimates to how many exist, at least in one continuity, on the last video. Moral of the story, it's a lot. So I selected my roster from the 2007 Transformers movie, which had 5 Autobots and 8 Decepticons. Some of you in the audience may have noticed I've only shown 6 redesigns for the Decepticons so far. That's because by the end of this video, I'm revealing the last 2 redesigns in the selected roster. I started with an important question in mind. What's the context of the redesigns? What in the redesigns would help communicate the context of where these characters reside? In my case, when designing them, what would they have if I were to create my own animated Transformers show, one animated in my style? I drew out these designs with a set of character design elements in mind. Shape theory, which uses familiar shapes to communicate character traits, color theory, which uses colors to communicate contextual tone, and distinct features and proportions, which set characters apart visually with unique features specific to their traits. In this video, I'm going over the redesigns I did for the Decepticons, Megatron, Barricade, Starscream, Bonecrusher, Blackout, and Brawl. Then a separate segment going over both Frenzy and Scorponok. Before I get into their individual designs, for Transformers in the Decepticon faction, I gave them shared design elements outside of just the insignia, to give a subtle visual sense of them all belonging to the same team. When utilizing shape theory, I composed their bodies of shapes between squares and triangles to convey a more ambitious, aggressive, and threatening appearance. And these particular shapes were meant to resemble the ones used in the Decepticon insignia. I noticed this was similarly done for the Decepticons in the War for Cybertron games. When utilizing color theory, I tried sticking to colder and/or duller colors. When I mostly referred to the G1 colors of the original designs, I added a slight twist of only using colder variants of said color, such as turning plain red into reddish pink, to closer resemble the color purple in the Decepticon symbol than it would be to the Autobots' red. In circumstances where I didn't use colder variants of the G1 colors, I would instead use duller variants to emphasize their priority of blending in, instead of being easily identifiable at first glance, as their tactic is to disguise themselves from humans. In shorter terms, they choose to be less noticeable because their priority is in deception. The use of less bright, eye-catching color could be seen in Michael Bay's Transformers movies, where most of the Decepticons were mostly grayish darker colors, as the vehicles they chose were designed for combat, or they just blended in with regular vehicles. The change of the color palette is also shared with how some Decepticons were recolored in Transformers Animated, like Starscream, whose red was changed to a bit more pinkish. When thinking of distinct features, I took account of how the Decepticons would choose to portray themselves in front of humans, Autobots, and any other perceived enemy. Instead of being open to showing any form of non-verbal facial emotion, they instead obscure their face with their helmets, showing minimal facial features, or just outright have non-human animalistic facial features, all of which to elicit fear and portray their non-peaceful and violence-oriented nature. I also took account of different types of body shapes and proportions, where instead of being more humanoid like the Autobots, the physical morphology of the Decepticons would be mostly intimidating, monstrous, and animalistic. A strategic choice to optimize their efficiency in battle. Most have clawed hands. Those who fly take inspiration from flying creatures. More physical, brutish characters have bulkier proportions, body weight, and armor, and so on and so forth.
Give me the Allspark, and you may live to be my pet.
This was the first Decepticon design I worked on when making redesigns for the Transformers. Some key things I kept in mind about Megatron was that he is in several iterations a leader, tyrannical, monstrously strong, cunning, ruthless, ambitious, and overall a whole menace. The vehicle I chose for Megatron would be a Cybertronian tank, and it's basically a modernization of his G1 gun mode, but big, and with mobility. I also intended the tank to have the ability to shift into a flight mode with wings, similar to Megatron's ult in Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. There is a thruster in the back of the tank for speed and flight. The fusion cannon is placed on the top of the turret. There's a heavily reinforced plate in the front and 2 pairs of treads on the tank. There's a large pair connected to the main body, and a pair set in the front for better maneuverability across terrain and front end elevation, which could shift the tank to be more like a planted stationary turret. When it came to color, I stuck with Megatron's G1 color palette, though I shifted the gray and dark gray to be a bit darker and increased the distribution of the darker gray across his body to add a little extra balance between the different shades of gray in the palette, as well as change the bits of red to be a bit more pinkish in color. When it came to his body, I wanted to make it a priority to visually depict Megatron's monstrous strength. So I made his upper body proportionately larger, such as focusing on his chest, shoulders, and arms. This larger upper body also would be meant to provoke fear to most whom he towers over, which is most everyone else, kind of like Frank Horrigan from Fallout 2.
You're not a hero, you're just a walking corpse.
On top of the proportionately larger upper body, he also has a more vertical connection between his hip and legs, like Vilgax from Ben 10, whom also towers over everybody else. Like most of the most recent designs of Megatron, I gave him spikes on his shoulder armor for a bit more of an intimidation factor on his imposing figure. I also placed a large dark gray armored chest piece depicting a contrasting bright purple Decepticon symbol on the front, a placement that's similar to most of Megatron's other iterations. I placed his large treads on his back, with the back thruster between them, and placed the front treads on his legs. And with his ability to hover in robot mode, I gave him extra heel plates and pairs of Cybertronian toes for smoother landing on any terrain. I also made his iconic fusion cannon massive in size, as big as his arm, as he is one of the very few characters who can actually wield it. When it came to his face, I wanted it to be fierce, kind of like how some demons are depicted, with a strong prominent nose and eyes with pupils that get sharper when he's angered, as well as sharp teeth. Most of his face would be heavily obscured by his gladiatorial helmet, inspired by some of Megatron's recent iterations such as Primes and War for Cybertrons. I really liked how similar it ended up looking to the helmet of Magneto, the cunning mutant leader of several teams in Marvel Comics, and I liked how similar it looked to the helmets of Spartan hoplites, the fierce battle-hardened soldiers of Sparta. The shape of the helmet would be mostly jagged and sharp-looking, to emphasize the danger and caution to be exercised when being faced with the very warrior wearing the helmet.
Where is the eBay item 21153? Where are the bosses?
Some key things I kept in mind when designing Barricade is that he is in several iterations an enforcer, a scout, intimidating, tough, authoritative. His motto is to punish and enslave. He searched for glasses on eBay once. The vehicle I chose for Barricade was a generic black and white police car similar to his Bayverse counterpart's black and white Ford Saline Mustang police car, which also has red and blue fog lights because I thought it'd complement the siren lights well. While not shown in the character sheet, the Decepticon symbol in his vehicle mode resides on the top of the car, behind the siren lights. which would end up on his chest in his robot mode. When it came to the color, well, yeah, I stuck to the color of most of Barricade's most recent iterations, which sport mostly black and white. I also added tidbits of yellow around the headlights, and your typical red and blue on the siren lights. When it came to his body, I made it so that Barricade's body was formed to emulate police riot gear. He would communicate his intimidating authoritative nature through his choice of vehicle, and makes himself appear like the local law enforcement equipped with gear designed for hostile situations. His torso makes up the vest, with the headlight in the center, the siren lights split and placed on both shoulders, the shoulder armor made up of the rear lights, the forearm armor composed of the car doors, aiming for a riot shield look here.
Riot shield, what else is it?
Oh, riot shield! I'm a pussy that use riot shield!
And I made his feet and legs look similar to an officer's boots, especially the soles. I placed his wheels on the hips and on his back, where his shoulder blades would be. This choice of placement of the design takes inspiration from his G1 counterpart, and I placed the split front grille of the car on his waist. I also gave him an electric baton as his weapon to match his riot police officer look. Also on a side note, it parallels Bumblebee's stinger. It's all connected! For Barricade's face, I gave him a very rigid face. I know it's a bit hard to see with the visor, but if you look close enough, you can see the rigid edges, highlighting his hardened demeanor. I gave Barricade a full-on riot police helmet with a tinted visor to conceal most of his facial features to communicate this ominous and threatening vibe, leaving his intense, soul-peering eyes to be the highlight of the mask, as well as his jagged, glowing mouth that shows whenever he talks, or rather, whenever he shouts, which noticeably looks similar to Blitzwing's random nutcase personality from Transformers Animated.
I just love it when your little insect feet try to run.
A few things I kept in mind when designing Starscream is that he is in several iterations second in command, an air commander, egotistical, treacherous, ambitious, deceptive, pretty devious, kinda freaky. The vehicle I chose for Starscream would be a jet that most closely resembles his Bayverse counterpart's F-22 Raptor fighter jet. While the vehicle may most closely resemble the Bayverse counterpart's jet, the color would be in reference to his G1 colors, but slightly altered to colder variations, such as changing red to pinkish red, and a dark shade of purple that leans towards blue. I also darkened the white to be slightly gray, and the cockpit's window would retain its yellow color. When it came to color, I chose to use colder variations of the G1 colors to further differentiate the palette from other characters in the whole Transformers roster, as well as keep his shade of red from being too similar to the Autobots' insignia's color. These sorts of changes were also done for Starscream's animated counterpart. Also, the distribution of color across Starscream's body is noticeably more diverse, filled with patterns, and takes up his body in abundance. This aspect of him reflects his flashy nature, and sets him apart from the rest of his Decepticon peers. Considering his treacherous nature, Starscream is not fully loyal to the Decepticon cause, not loyal to a faction, he is loyal to only himself. When it came to his body, I gave Starscream a thin, lanky body, filled with different gaps as well as thin and flat structures for his appendages. These particular parts of the body were meant to make him more aerodynamic in his robot mode, giving him efficient mobility in the sky and midair. The gaps allow air to pass through, reducing air resistance while moving through the sky, kind of like the gaps between the wings of biplanes. The thin, wide surface area of some of the body parts assist with midair steering, similar to the function of wings, rudders, and stabilizers found on most aircraft. The upper arms are chain-like, attached to a ball and socket joint, and the forearms are composed of these 4 adjustable flat panels, with jet stabilizers sticking outward. These forearms conceal his tools as well as his null ray. I gave him long and large shoulder pads, kind of like Vegeta's shoulder pads over here. This particular design was meant to reflect Starscream's deceptive nature, as it's his attempt to seem more physically imposing than he actually seems, without them. I also gave Starscream digitigrade legs like those of Earth's avians, which provide the advantage of better launching and shock absorption from landing. I placed his wings and thrusters on his back, his cockpit on the center of his torso, and the jet's air intake on his chest, like most of his iterations. When it came to his face, I wanted Starscream to look naturally devious, like he's got a resting, scheming face. I came up with something along the lines of a cat's face, especially the :3 cat emoticon, but evil. So I gave him sharp eyes and a sharp W-shaped mouth that slightly protrudes outwards. Weirdly enough, I almost gave him a full bird beak, but I personally preferred the mouth. As for the helmet, the top mainly takes inspiration from his G1 counterpart, and I just added these triangular sides with the vents that reach around the head. A few things I kept in mind when designing Bonecrusher is that he is in some iterations destructive, like really likes destroying things, a Constructicon, dislikes flaws, really aggressive, pretty hateful, hates everything and everyone, he even hates himself? Man, someone give this guy a hug. Wait, no, he'll crush your bones! When it came to his vehicle, I took inspiration from Bonecrusher's G1 bulldozer. Plain and simple, a bulldozer with a bright caution tape stripe on the side. Now for the color, I'm about to blow your minds. Initially, I was trying to find a good dull shade of green in reference to his G1 counterpart. Now you might be looking at the screen all confused like, JB, what are you talking about? That guy is clearly green. And I kept thinking so too, but actually, it's a dark shade of tan. Insane, right? I chose this particular shade because of how the color fits a construction setting and how visually close it is to an actual green color. I also made his metallic parts slightly purple in reference to the bits of purple found on his G1 counterpart. When it came to his body, I wanted Bonecrusher to have a body that would help him live up to his name, to crush bones. So I gave him a large round spherical body, one that functions like a wrecking ball, able to crush and grind up anything unfortunate enough to stand in his way. I also had the idea that he would be able to retract his limbs and his head into his body like a turtle, changing into this destructive giant ball mode. This ability takes heavy inspiration from Cannonbolt from Ben 10. I also had the treads take up his legs like in his G1 counterpart's legs. And yeah, they seem a bit stubby in some angles. I'd imagine if he tripped he could easily roll back onto his feet, given how he's like a ball and has two big arms to help him get back up. It may be a bit on the nose considering that bone is in his name, but I thought it'd be cool for the body to resemble a big scary skull, since skull designs are iconic all around media, and it stylizes the wrecking ball body. I placed his smokestacks and his front grille on his back, and the rear compartment made up his shoulders, with spikes coming out of the outward facing sides. The plain sides of the bulldozer took up his forearms, and the caution tape sections took up the lower corners of the body. When it came to his head, much like his body, I styled his face after a skull, but sharp and pointy, and certainly non-human.
Wonderful. I'll try to contain my excitement.
A few things I kept in mind when designing Blackout is that he is in several iterations. Okay, I'll be honest, I had to do some extensive research to get a profile on Blackout's known iterations before the first Bay film. The name had been used in a variety of different ways, though characterizations after the first Bayverse film followed similar traits. So far, they were loyal, to Megatron specifically, sneaky, can fly, determined, brutish, usually assigned to specialized teams, like the Heavy Brigade or the Destruction Team. One iteration was even in a combiner pair, with their seemingly identical sibling. Not gonna lie, that's kinda giving me an idea. When it came to his vehicle, I made Blackout a dark blue combination of his Bayverse counterparts Sikorsky MH-53 Pavlo helicopter and a UH-60 Blackhawk. The larger, bulkier size of the overall body has more in common with the Pavlo, but its parts, such as the cockpit, number of rotor blades, side doors, as well as the wings and their accompanying machine guns, take closer inspiration from the Blackhawk. There's also a star on his side doors. This was meant to be a vague military symbol in reference to his attack on the military base in Qatar using the form of one of their own aircrafts, though it has been brought to my attention that it looks more like the NFL football team's Dallas Cowboys logo. Now, I can't unsee it. It even has a similar color. I don't even watch that much football. How did this happen? The choice in the dark blue color was meant to combine the two prominent colors from his G1 counterparts, blue and gray. I also added this bit of dark green on the beak in reference to his green face on his G1 counterpart. When it came to his body, I wanted to keep his Bayverse counterpart's huge and bulky body, while also taking into account that since his alt is an aircraft, parts of his body would take inspiration from avians like Starscream's parts, but would be larger and heavy-set variations of those parts to account for his larger size. The split front end of the helicopter would take up his chest, like in his Bayverse's iteration, with the space between sporting the Decepticon insignia. The side doors would take up the shoulder armor, the wings would take up the forearms, forming paneled forearm armor similar to Starscream's, and the pair of machine guns attached to the wings would be stored within these parts. The helicopter blades would actually form these arm blades on the side, kind of like those things on the side of the arms of characters such as Batman, Spider-Man 2099, the New Goblin, etc. This part of the body was meant to make Blackout seem more bird-like by simulating the structure of bird wings. Speaking of bird-like, I gave Blackout digitigrade legs like Starscream, but with a thicker structure instead to support the heavier body. The section under the rotor would be used to form the back and would shift into a mechanism used for hovering in robot mode. When creating the head for Blackout, I tapped into the bird-like roots of the rest of his design and decided to make his head very bird-like. Combined with the form of a pilot's helmet, the overall shape of the head takes heavy inspiration from Star Fox's Falco. Given the original G1 Blackout has a cone head, I changed it up to form similar to Falco's head shape. The design of the face mainly takes inspiration from pilot helmets, with the visor where you can see the sharp eyes peering through them, and the beak was meant to simulate the oxygen mask. A setup similar to Vulture's mask from Spider-Man Homecoming and that one post-credit scene from Morbius.
Has to do with Spider-Man, I think.
Can we blow him now? I want to see the pretty explosions!
Some things I kept in mind when designing Brawl is that he is in several iterations loud, violent, volatile, a warrior, a combaticon, a tank, literally.
Angry! Guard! Angry! Guard!
The vehicle I chose for Brawl was quite simply a dark green tank with traces of dark brownish gray, with a light green Decepticon insignia on the left side of the glacis plate. The tank is armed with 2 additional missile cannons on the sides of the main central turret and gun. The extra firepower was inspired by his Bayverse counterpart's similar modifications. When it came to his color, I chose the plain dark green in reference to his G1 color, but slightly altered to have the color of those green Army Men toys, and the dark brownish gray colors are in reference to the color you would find in a camo palette. When it came to Brawl's body, I wanted him, even in his robot mode, to look like a tank. I wanted him to be big. I wanted him to be huge. A body large and sturdy enough to withstand heavy incoming artillery, all coming at once. I wanted all the tank's front plating and the front lights to form the torso in a similar formation to that of the belly of a turtle shell, known as the plastron. I had the treads take up the shoulders and upper arms. The turret and the main gun would end up on his back. All of these choices were based on the placement of his vehicle parts on his G1 counterpart. Also, the 2 side missile launchers would become dual handheld missile launchers. When it came to his head, I wanted Brawl's head to look similar to the masks found on several menacing space soldiers found throughout media, such as stormtroopers from Star Wars and ultramarines from Warhammer 40k. Including the iconic feature of vents on the space around the mouth, and the formation of the helmet structure. The structure of the helmet on the forehead was inspired by John Carver's helmet design from Dead Space 3, and the visor was inspired by Brawl's G1 visor, but thinner and contains red and yellow lights. The color of the mouth vents came from Brawl's G1 face mask, which was reddish pink, and I made it so that it glows whenever he speaks or makes vocal noises.
Not so tough without a head, are you?
The last 2 Decepticons on the roster were minicons, and I'll be honest, I wasn't originally planning on making animations for them, let alone designs for them. But then I was like, what if I did? So I did. At least designs. When designing the minicons, I designed them in reference to their symbiotic relationship with other Transformers. Frenzy was designed to look like a cop to complement Barricade's officer look. Scorponok was given a beak-like structure and dimmed colors to complement Blackout's overall design. The alt I chose for Frenzy would simply be a black boombox in reference to his Bayverse counterpart, who turned into a boombox. The color palette was meant to be similar to his G1 counterpart, but I took out the red and blue and gave white to match Barricade. When designing the body, I had his speakers on the sides of his chest and the tape player and buttons on his abdomen, and added a yellow line design in the middle of the chest in reference to his G1 design. I designed Frenzy's legs to have double-jointed running blades, and I designed his arms with barbed blades attached to his wrists that can flip out. This part was inspired by the arms of praying mantises. They could also shift his forearms into claws. I also gave Frenzy a police cap with the Decepticon insignia as the badge, and sunglasses meant to look like glasses you may see cops wearing all across media. For Scorponok, well, he's, you know, you get it, he's a robot scorpion. I mean, how could he not be? But as for his other form, instead of being a whole different robot, I made it to be more like an alt mode in relation to the scorpion mode, where his front half would sit up straight, his tail retracts, his claws become cannons, and his helmet would slide over his face. His colors would draw inspiration from his G1 counterpart, but dimmed to match Blackout's color palette. And there we have it. That's the thought process on how I redesigned the Decepticons. If you haven't seen it already, or want to see it again, there's a video where I covered how I redesigned the Autobots. I'll link it to the description of this video, and in the top right corner of the screen. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did—